If you don't like my voice, it's because I'm sick. No other reason. I went to Oppenheimer opening night, and it was the first time I ever felt like an adult at the movie theater. Pretty sure it's because up until Oppenheimer, most of the movies I've watched, especially the ones I've watched in theaters, have been Marvel movies. Never really a movie that would be considered serious cinema by the majority of the world. Now, obviously, I think the MCU has produced some very good movies, even some great movies over the past, decade, and I do think it has a lot to do with their characters. I mean, I will fight you if you say that Tony Stark doesn't have a fantastically crafted arc. However, there is something to be said about the fact that the majority of the movies I have watched in my 19 years of life have been animated kids movies and superhero blockbusters. I don't know, I feel like I'm missing out on a whole world of cinema. Maybe I don't even know what cinema is. What is cinema? Well, it's a moving picture. Literally. It can also be a synonym for a movie theater. Really, it's not so hoity-toity as a lot of people, including myself, think it is. It doesn't even mean masterpiece of cinematography and screenwriting and directing. But the most basic definition is motion picture. And movies, TV shows, video games, they are all motion pictures. So technically, Batwoman could be considered cinema.
I need you to fix his suit.
The suit is literal perfection.
It will be. When it fits a woman.
But no one would say that, myself included. Most people associate cinema with movies, so let's draw that line. Cinema is movies. But then that could include Thor: The Dark World, Captain Marvel, Quantumania. Okay, what's cinema as an art form then? Again, that's a difficult definition to nail down. Cinema is generally a branch of art that uses dialogue, editing, the scene's layout, light, sound, and decor by the film made. It has the opportunity to explain everything human in depth. Marvel movies are actually cinema. It has the opportunity to explain everything human in depth. And what movies did I basically imply were unworthy of being called cinema? Thor: The Dark World, Captain Marvel, Quantumania. Now, while this was technically a joke, I kind of meant it. But according to this definition, they would be cinema. Even Captain Marvel. The second part of the definition says that movies have the opportunity to explore human things. Thor: The Dark World deals with a distraught brotherly relationship. Captain Marvel, while not a good example or an in-depth example, does explore finding one's own power and overcoming the expectations others have of you. And Quantumania does deal with a teenager and parent relationship. Okay, those are human things, so technically they are cinema. But we all know they're not good examples of cinema. Maybe it's the shallowness of the themes, maybe it's everything else in the movie. The MCU has become soulless, but no one really said cinema had to have a soul. It's like the Mona Lisa. Yeah, it's good and it's really iconic, but it doesn't really mean anything. People can find meaning in it, but people can find meaning in anything. I mean, some people thought Captain Marvel was good, so... Basically, it's unfair to say the MCU isn't cinema. It's just not always good cinema. Everything sort of blends together. With the exception of a few, most superhero movies tend to blend together. They are more formulaic, they have similar elements. I mean, it is a genre, that's what makes a genre a genre. And don't get me wrong, these formulas are a very big part of what makes superhero movies so entertaining. But they don't do much to help them stand out. It's the things like characters and character arcs. That's what makes superhero movies stand out, at least in my opinion. So in a genre where characters are not focused on enough, it can make it difficult to remember one movie from another. It's a blur of CGI and fight scenes and cool outfits. Okay, this is probably going to offend some people. It would have offended me at one time. But superhero movies are like the YA of novels. They have different characters, different packaging, slightly different plots, but they're all basically the same. The majority of my cinematic experiences has basically been the exact same thing repackaged in slightly different supersuits. As I'm smack dab in the middle of an existential crisis and starting to crave more variety, very uncharacteristic of me, I don't want stories to blend together anymore. Not that I ever did, but I'm starting to be aware of it and kind of annoyed by it. My favorite stories are the ones that stick with me, the ones that give me story hangover where I can't stop thinking about them for days or even weeks after they conclude and send me into a teeny tiny little depression. I'm looking at you, Xenoblade Chronicles 3. You didn't have to do that. You didn't have to do that! Movies versus TV shows, and the MCU. I've convinced myself I don't really like movies.
And with Marvel, it feels like long-form storytelling. It feels like big-budget television, you know?
It really does.
Exceedingly big-budget television.
Yeah, it's very interesting thing.
But you get a lot of time with all the characters, and it's really, really cool.
That's why I figured I really liked the MCU, even though I preferred watching TV shows. I like following characters for extended periods of time, because I care about them, I'm invested in them. However, I am starting to wonder if I just haven't watched enough movies. Movies might not have a season's worth of content, but they have a story, and they fit the story into 2 hours. They have a beginning, middle, and end. And the end is the most important part, because let's be real, TV shows often run way too long or not long enough. And the MCU is... Let's not talk about that. Basically, movies know when the story is over. Yeah, studios might drum up bad or unnecessary sequels, but in terms of the story of the actual movie, it's over. Most movies are set up to not need a sequel because sequels aren't guaranteed. As someone who has only watched the first Jurassic Park movie and none of the sequels or the Jurassic World franchise, I can tell you that that movie is fine as a standalone movie. Yeah, there is a loose end, but a loose end doesn't automatically mean the story isn't over. But I think the fact that most of the movies I've seen have basically been long-form TV episodes has sort of conditioned me to have a hard time being invested in shorter stories and thus struggle to watch them, but has also affected the way I think about stories in general. I always want the most out of a story. I want as much time with the characters as possible. I want everything to be as developed as possible. I want the world and the reasons and just everything to be explored to the maximum. Some movies give me that, most don't. But, here's a thought. Maybe not everything needs to be explored to the ends of the earth and beyond. Maybe that's the beauty of movies. We are all made up of moments, and while TV shows typically focus on the whole, movies seem to focus on the parts. Writer-specific problems. One of my main sources of learning and inspiration when it comes to writing are movies. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, a story is a story, so you can learn just as much from a video game as you could a novel. However, the fact that one of my main sources of inspiration has been the MCU is something that I think has hindered me more than I thought it did. Number 1. Characters. The thing is, the MCU has put a lot of focus on certain types of characters in recent years. Like, it's a trope at this point that the newest main character introduced in a Marvel movie is going to be witty and quippy and quirky. Like, I would be lying if I said that I didn't have moments where I was worried that my characters did not have diverse enough personalities. And that might be partly in my head because I do think I put a lot of effort into creating interesting characters and developed characters and realistic characters. But at the same time, I am only 19. I have only been exposed to so many different types of people. And the fact that one of my main sources of stories is the MCU means that a lot of my inspiration for characters is going to be the tropes and norms and cliches that Marvel characters have kind of become. Like, I pride myself in spending a lot of time developing my characters, but that doesn't mean that I'm not subconsciously limited by the content I consume. 2. Themes. I mentioned earlier in the video that young adult fiction is a lot like the superhero genre. One of the things that YA fiction and the MCU have in common are themes. Specifically, the lack of depth in the themes. Now again, I'm not talking every single Marvel movie and every single YA novel here. I'm just talking in general. YA books often don't push themes far enough, or they don't explore them in enough depth. And this is coming from someone who has read a lot of YA books in her time. I'm not talking from a better than thou condescending place, okay? I'm not doing that. But the MCU is basically notorious, at least from a writer's perspective, for not fleshing out themes. I mean, I have an entire script about Iron Man 2 where a chunk of it is talking about how badly they handled some of the most interesting themes in the MCU. It's so annoying. And I also have my Quantumania review where I talk about how they had some interesting themes, but they did not do enough with them. They didn't develop them enough. So as a writer who watches a lot of content that doesn't push themes far enough is something that has made me wonder if I push themes far enough. I mean, that is one of my biggest issues, I guess, with my own writing, is the fact that I'm never sure if I'm making my themes clear. So to have one of my main sources for stories and inspiration be a franchise that doesn't do a whole lot with their themes is probably not a good thing. Beyond pushing themes far enough, there's also the fact that the MCU has a limited amount of themes they have presented and they have attempted to explore. Now, I'm not going to fault the MCU for not exploring every idea and theme that exists. They are only one franchise and they are also bound by the limits of the superhero genre. And I'm not saying that the MCU doesn't have themes that are common or even staples of other genres or even just to humanity in general. But superhero movies still tend to focus on certain themes, like any genre. I want to branch out. I want to see how other stories, how other movies develop their themes. I want to see how far they push them. I want to see what kinds of themes they present. As I said earlier, themes are one of my biggest problems when it comes to my writing. So why keep myself in a box where I'm not going to learn anything? I mean, that's just a waste of 3 different streaming platforms. My mission to become a film buff. I want to watch more movies. And TV shows, but especially movies. I think it will not only help me come up with more examples for my videos, because I do use Lord of the Rings a lot. Forgive me. But I think it'll also help me become a better writer. And hopefully help me better understand the art of filmmaking and screenwriting in particular, because I'm kind of interested in that, without spending thousands and thousands of dollars. Now, I'm not saying that watching a bunch of movies is automatically going to change my preference from TV shows to movies, but I hope it will at least show me what cinema is truly capable of. Is interpretation fundamental to motion pictures? Are some stories just better in a shorter format? Are my characters all the same, or are people just fundamentally similar? How far can themes be pushed? I want to explore the art form of cinema and truly determine, once and for all, if the Marvel Cinematic Universe is cinema. Oh yeah, I guess I already answered that. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. If I stated any opinions in this, which I believe I did, they were my opinions, so you don't have to take them seriously, you know, I'm not an expert at anything. So now's the time for some promo. I've written 5 books. This is a literary anthology. It's about the transition from adolescence to adulthood. It is an existential crisis in a book. This is the Mortal's End trilogy. It is a medieval fantasy, and it's about a war. With this sorceress, there is magic, there's a dragon, there is princes, and there is princesses, and warriors, and angst, because I wrote it when I was a teenager, when I was like 13, 14, and 15, so you know. And this is a standalone fantasy set in the same world as the trilogy, but takes place before, but it was written after, so the writing quality is a little bit better. It is a very morally gray story, and it's about these people who have to go find this ancient artifact that will hopefully save a country from famine, but of course they all have their own reasons for doing things. Chaos may or may not ensue, so. All of my books are available on Amazon. There is a link in the description below. Oh jeez, just gotta crack that open. Oh, that feels really good. Holy, I've been talking so long. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.